empowerment in the Arab region. Slow. Okay. I need to speak slow. So when we discussed about the forum and the role of our partnership, we witnessed already during the Arab platform for disaster risk reduction, which was held in Tunis last year. There was the emergence of a number of partners coming together and having their commitment actually showed as 5 different stakeholders who are actually around the table came forwards, put their commitment statement in the forum in terms of supporting the government. So it's like in a spirit of shared responsibility it was developed. Now, at the same time, if we look at in a look back, 2015 gave us the Sendai framework, at the same time the Agenda 2030, and the climate agreement. So and I think since then we have been talking about, really having coherence among the agendas at all level, at global, at regional and national level, and we have been discussing about how we can work with more stakeholders and partners so that we can actually leverage on these different international instruments and then move forward with a sense of shared responsibility and partnership. So with that aim, we thought we will have a discussions here, since majority of people will be related to different segments of the sustainable development, and sustainable development. So the main objective here for this session is to look forward that how we can work with number of partners, those who are either working on only disaster risk reduction or working on different aspect of SDGs. There are partnerships and stakeholder engagement both at the SDG level and with the disaster risk reduction community. How do we bring them together and make ourselves actually much more stronger in terms of reaching out the development sectors? So we are fortunate to have a very distinguished panelist, both from League of Arab States, from Government of Palestine, Government of Tunisia, as well as our colleagues from the stakeholder groups, those who have been working very closely with us and put their commitment on disaster risk reduction. We also have the honor of having our special representative of Secretary General, Mami Mizitori. I think most of you might have met her already. She was in Tunisia. She spent time with us the whole conference, and she is here. We will hear from her in a while. And so in order to set the scene, first of all, I would like to invite the special representative to give a keynote address, and then we will go into the panel discussion. So, Mami, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, Excellencies, distinguished representatives of member states, intergovernmental organizations, and stakeholder groups, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing me to address you here at this very important special session on partnership. This is my first visit to Lebanon, and over the past few days I have observed with very much interest, and I'm actually quite impressed at how this country is run on the basis of partnerships across political and religious lines. It is a partnership model for prevention to work, and will spur cooperation in reducing both disaster risk and disaster losses from the many hazards which threaten this country and indeed the entire region. We are meeting at a crucial time, 4 years after the adoption of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is the global plan to reduce disaster losses. The Sendai Framework was the first of the 2030 agenda to be adopted in March 2015, and these are all geared towards sustainable development. Its success or failure will greatly influence our ability to eradicate poverty, combat climate change, and ultimately achieve all of the SDGs. There are many unique features to the Sendai framework that you may know, and this can be taken into consideration as this region considers the results from the first 4-year cycle of the SDG follow-up, which will be presented at this year's high-level political forum in July in New York. What are the characteristics of the Sendai framework? So firstly, the framework recognizes that we need to break the cycle of disaster response recovery. We need to make a paradigm shift in our mindset and our behavior from managing the disaster to managing the disaster risks. And here in Lebanon, I have been greatly encouraged, having met the Prime Minister, His Excellency Mr. Saad El-Hariri. In his office, the nation's disaster risk management unit is nested. I also met the Minister of Interior and municipalities, the Governor of Mount Lebanon, and the Mayor of Byblos. And all these leaders have given me a unique insight into how political leadership, commitment, and strong governance are driving this country's efforts to build resilience to disasters at national, regional, and local levels. The Sendai framework also recognizes that while the state is primarily responsible for reducing disaster, protecting human lives, minimizing economic loss from disaster, this has to be achieved through a very strong partnership involving all of society. This is a very unique aspect of the Sendai framework, and we are very proud of it. So yesterday I went to the governorate of Saida, and I was delighted to know that the staff in the governorate, they are on top of their day job as engineers or planners. They are voluntarily engaging in disaster response and prevention. And interestingly, most of them were women. And they were telling me that, well, maybe women have this natural instinct about protecting, and that's why they do it without being paid. They sit on committees and work for the prevention. So again, they are in the government, but they are working as committed citizens, individuals. Resilient, sustainable development is only possible through this all-of-society approach. And that was a clear message which came out from the second Arab partnership meeting, which took place here in Beirut last year in December. The meeting brought together 35 stakeholders and partners from across the region, and they represented children and youth, elderly people, local communities, academia, science and technology practitioners, international and regional organizations, and of course the UN family as well. And this meeting itself was evidence of the good work which is done at the regional level here, where everyone are expending a lot of effort to promote coherence and partnership across all the important agenda, which are the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and Sendai Framework, because we all know that we have to move forward these goals together. And the organization of the Arab African Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction last October in Tunis is also a testament of strong partnership, because every 2 years in all regions, all 5 regions, we have a regional conference around disaster risk reduction, in last year in Tunis, where I believe a lot of you came, for the first time, the two regions, the Arab region and the African region, they came together so that they can strengthen partnership, share their experiences across regions. And this platform brought together 900 participants from 60 countries. They represented governments, NGOs, UN agencies, private sector, and stakeholders. And the 5 stakeholder groups came together to voluntarily issue their statement of action on how, as young people, how, as women, they are going to achieve the Sendai framework. Partnerships, if they are to succeed, they need to be nurtured. And here I would like to recognize the important role that the National Council for Scientific Research here in Lebanon is playing, because the National Council for Scientific Research is now the headquarter of the Arab Science and Technology Advisory Group. This is a group which will bring together science, technology, and policymakers across the region. And because of the National Council's willingness and the Secretary General, Professor Hamza's willingness to do this, it is happening. So I do hope that the other stakeholder groups can also find in countries in the region a nest where there is an organization which will be committed to supporting the across the region partnership. In the case of the Arab Disaster Risk Reduction Children and Youth Group, the Arab Disaster Risk Reduction Civil Society Group, the Arab Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Group, and the Arab Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. It is very encouraging to see that stakeholder groups not only have presented their statements of action, but they also have action plans to implement them. And these plans include how to engage with their peer groups formed under the Sustainable Development Agenda, and how they will engage with governments to ensure coherence in national policies, strategies, programs, and projects. I would also like to mention at the global level too, in order to support all that is happening at the regional level, our office has created a Sendai stakeholder engagement mechanism. And there is also an advisory group at the global level. So we would like to connect the global level efforts to the regional level efforts. It is my strong belief that we are at a very critical point at history. And this is obvious as we face existential threats posed by climate change and the loss of biodiversity. We are in the need to drastically cut greenhouse gas emission, but we also need to step up our investment in adaptation as well. Mitigation, yes, ultimately it has to happen, but we do also need to adapt. And we would like to see the adaptation to climate change be hand in hand with efforts to reduce disaster risk, because you may know that in the past 20 years, 90% of the major disasters are related to climate change. And when we talk about hazards, we need to deal with a wide range of them. They are not only the natural hazards in this region, excuse me, storms, floods, drought, but there are also man-made hazards related to environmental, biological, and technological threats. And we need to increase our ambition in everything we do in order to succeed in reducing disaster loss. I hope that the partnerships that we have in this region will support the national strategies as well. So in the Sendai framework, there are 7 targets, and one of the targets, target E, says that we need a substantial number of countries to have their national strategies on disaster risk reduction by 2020, which is next year. But this can only be a practical and efficient strategy if the stakeholders can put in what they need from their strategy. because it can't be an only government strategy. It has to be a strategy that includes what all the stakeholders need in order to implement the Sendai framework. This region has a long and intricate history of drought. I mentioned about all the natural hazards that you are facing, and drought is one of the very difficult ones. And also, I must mention that the protracted fragility context, where there have been thank you very much, many years of conflict. The conflict and the post-conflict situation brings fragility to everybody who are involved, the refugees, but also the people who live next to the refugees. And this context is, I believe, something that we need to focus a lot in this region if we are to think about effective disaster risk reduction measures. So there are a lot of issues that we need to tackle, but all of these, again, need to be tackled through partnership. And we are fortunate, really, that there are very strong already partners here, and I am delighted here that a lot of you are here today, and I look forward to an active and fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mami Mejitori, Special Representative of Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction. Colleagues, as you heard very rightly, I think all the three international agendas, a common element of all the three were that sustainable development, resilient and sustainable development is not possible without engagement of the whole of society. And this is something I think both those who are working on disaster risk reduction through Sendai framework or on the broader sustainable development goal towards the Agenda 2030 achievement and the climate change agreement, we all agree on that. We have been working in the spirit of bringing more stakeholders and partners in our work. But at the same time, the question is, how do we nurture this partnership so that it's not one-off activity we do or in meet in the conference or something, but there is a sense of ownership and a shared responsibility in true sense that we all partners try to complement the actions of governments. Because if you look at all the three international instruments, they put the primary responsibility on the governments, but at the same time they also recognize that it cannot be done only by the governments, it has to be a whole of society engagement. So for today's discussion, I think we are really fortunate that we have people, those who are working as stakeholder groups, as well as we have colleagues from government who can guide this process, and a League of Arab States who can actually convene and coordinate this process. So in order to start this panel discussion with this spirit, that how do we nurture the partnership, as well as how do we move to a stage where the stakeholders or partners working in different spheres can actually come together and be much more strengthened. So in order to start that, I think we have a number of colleagues, as I said, from stakeholder groups, government and League of Arab States. We have all their bios I think in the package, which is shared with all of you. I would really encourage you to look at the bios, because I'm not going to introduce a long introduction of them. But to start the discussion, I would first I will thank all the colleagues, all the panelists actually, to really agree for this session and give your time and energy for this session. So let me first turn to League of Arab States. Our dear colleague Nada Alagizi, who is the director of the Sustainable Development and International Cooperation Department in the League of Arab States. We are really fortunate to have you, Nada, here. We have been working so closely with you. You have been so supportive to not only the SDG community, but also to UNISDR and our work. So in order to start, I would like to first ask your opinion on how do you from a League of Arab States perspective, how do you actually see this opportunities of partnership bringing disaster risk reduction partners and stakeholders, those who are working on broader issues of SDGs, and the climate change community together? How do you see it happening in this region?
Thank you, Sujit, and thank you, Your Excellency. It's a pleasure to be here with you. But as the Arab League representative, I have to speak in Arabic, so allow me to speak in Arabic. طبعا جامعة الدول العربية تقدر عاليا
The League of Arab States highly appreciates this topic that we are discussing today. It is indeed a very important issue. We are not only discussing one topic, we are talking about three key agreements that have been endorsed and adopted in 2015, namely Sendai Framework, Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We do believe that this is really a historic step that has been undertaken when all these three international agreements have been endorsed and adopted in the same year. And this really imposes a great responsibility on us. If we consider the implementation of the SDGs in the framework of the 2030 Agenda, we can clearly see that we cannot really decouple these SDGs from the other two international conventions that also play a crucial role and that require a high sense of partnership, as my colleague Mr. Sujet has said. And also SDG 17 on partnerships is highly important. This is the SDG that is considered as a core goal and cross-cutting goal in all the SDGs, as if we do not have all the stakeholders engaged in the Sustainable Development Goals, we will not be able to implement such goals. This is a very important issue, and that is why we encourage all kinds of partnerships with governments, civil society organizations, private sector, as well as international and regional organizations, in order to support the implementation of the SDGs as the League of Arab States. And we definitely seek in our league to achieve well-being and decent living for the local community members of Arab countries. The three international conventions share a common feature, namely climate action or climate change, which is the SDG 13. So we can clearly see that climate change has been tackled and covered by the three international conventions, and it is considered as the key goal. And we have seen how we have been impacted by climate change, particularly in the Arab region. We have been disproportionately affected by climate change impacts in our Arab region as a result of the demographic growth, as a result of the climate change, and as a result of the excessive consumption patterns that we have in our region, in addition to the use of non-renewable energy sources. And this has adversely impacted our countries, particularly the middle-income countries. Hence, the issue of climate change is vital in the Arab region. We can clearly perceive its impact, and we can clearly see how it could be having some disastrous, devastating impacts in the future. And this has really brought us to focus on building the resilience and flexibility of Arab countries. Without resilience, we would be facing all kinds of disasters and we will not be able to move forward in our countries. But how to build such resilience in our different countries? We know that we invest a lot in human investment in the region and in terms of education, poverty reduction, food security, but all these achievements could be lost if we do not curb and prevent the disasters that result from climate change. Therefore, if we do not have enough resilience, we will not be able to move forward in our countries. And this brings us back to the importance of partnerships. The three international conventions or agreements need to be interlinked. Without such interlinkage, we cannot really work efficiently as we have done over the past few years. And that is why we have thought of adopting the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as it is underpinned by solid and strong partnerships and the different principles that are enshrined by the United Nations charters and principles. 2030 agenda plays a key role in achieving any kind of sustainable development in the future of the Arab region. Therefore, how we could really brainstorm together and engage the different decision makers, including the Arab governments, planning authorities, investors as well. How could we really invest in projects that could be yielding high returns and positive impacts on our societies? And how could these projects be sensitive to the different disasters that we could potentially suffer from? We really need some participatory planning, participatory development and participatory investments then in our region, while taking into consideration the different challenges we are facing. We shouldn't be working in an isolated way. We should be joining our efforts to face all such challenges. Our action plans currently, and in the face of the different challenges we are facing, our action plans shouldn't be isolated. They should be interlinked and coherent. That is why sustainable development is a golden opportunity for us in order to strengthen our joint efforts and actions and to engage the different stakeholders and competent authorities, civil society organizations, youth, women groups, and all the different segments of populations around the globe. All these people and segments have the right to benefit and have a share in sustainable development, and everybody has an input to contribute to the sustainable development process. Probably we used to think that some groups should be excluded from our meetings and from our closed sessions, but today these groups of people have become fully engaged in the different debates and discussions, and I believe that this is a key step we have made recently. In a nutshell, the spirit of the 2030 agenda should be mainstreamed in all our action plans in order to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nada, for giving your perspective from the League of Arab States. I think, as you said, I mean, we need to also look at how do we, in this process of partnership, how do we engage the governments, the Arab governments, so that they feel the importance of this partnership and how they can see the complementarity of this effort in the region. So let me move on to the next, now our colleague, Dr. Mohammed Odeh Kasravi, who is the coordinator of the Disaster Risk Management Center from the Prime Minister's Office from the State of Palestine. So Dr. Odeh, we have always been excited with your motivation and commitment, the way we have been working with you. And I would also like to get your view on how, as a government, how do you see the value addition of these partnerships? And how do you see that this partnership can help you bringing the agendas, the SDG implementation, the Sendai framework implementation, and the climate change adaptation implementation at the national level? Because I think this is, when you look at all the three agendas, it sometimes becomes challenging for a government to implement all of them. So how do you see the value addition of partners and other organizations actually reaching out to you?
Thank you, Mr. Thanks, Special Representative. Allow me, Mr. Sajid, to talk in Arabic because to use my 5 minutes fully. فلسطين دولة ناشئة.
Palestine is a nascent and emergent country. It is still facing problems similar to several countries around the world as a result of natural disaster, but it has a unique situation. In fact, it is facing man-made disasters as well. Palestine joined the UN conventions and the Paris Agreement. It was among the first countries to sign the Paris Agreement, the 2030, the 2020, and the UNFCCC. And Palestine has also been a pioneer in the Sendai framework. There was a Palestinian governmental academic delegation from the private sector and from the civil society also went to Sendai, Japan, and we started working with the regional office of the UNSDR in Egypt. And after entering all of these international fora, Palestine started a governmental initiative because it is in charge of the initiative, sending national teams for the 2020-2030, and it adopted the concept of participatory sustainable development as a work, as an action in order to achieve the agendas of the national policies. And now we have a national policies agenda for 2017-2020, and there was a national team that was formed in order to follow up the objectives of the SDGs in participation with the Council of Ministers, with the participation of non-governmental and governmental organizations, in addition also to the private sector and the academia. The priorities of the national development have been crystallized in the hope of integrating them whenever there are sectoral and cross-sectoral plans to be adopted by the ministries. One of the most important concerns and problems that we faced was how to enhance cooperation among partners in order to mobilize efforts and unify the efforts and mobilizing funds and financial support to have plans for every sector. This has led to think in common with the government, with the private sector, with the academia, and with the non-governmental organizations to constitute national task groups, each one in its own expertise, working on several SDGs. So these were distributed over sectors, and the Palestinian government at that time, under the title of the Citizen First, started with the National Policies Agenda, and the National Policies Agenda intersected also with the 2020-2030 Plan of Action, and which became sub-goals, and we had 75 sub-goals that were distributed to the different sectors. 18 sectoral plans have been initiated. The youth, the women, education, as is happening in all of the Arab countries. And these were distributed to ministries, and the non-governmental sector and the private sector were also evolved according to the expertise. The social activities were included in the Ministry of Social Affairs because there was a plan for the social affairs. Let's talk, for example, about human rights. These were integrated with the Ministry of Justice. And also, when the sectoral strategies were drafted, in all of the SDGs were taken into consideration in the 105 sub-goals. So the Palestinians thought about the specific situations and put them in sub-goals that reached the number of 105. So 105 sub-goals were used. So this is a track that we have initiated with our national efforts in order to give a national aspect to the strategies. At the same time, we agreed on building a national disaster or disaster risk management center to find solutions for our problems, and at the same time we joined international conventions for 2020-2030, and we joined also Sendai framework and the implementation of Sendai, and we have participated as well maybe in all of the trainings and all of the activities and the events, and we have introduced the required information. We also worked on Goal A in Palestine. We have a law for disaster risk management or reduction, and we have a decision on the part of the Council of Ministers, and now we entered into partnerships with 39 procedural manual working organize the relations in normal situations and disaster situations. This is the phase where we are at. Now we are trying through national dialogues to reach the national strategic plan for disaster risk reduction, and we started working on this with the World Bank at the start of 2019. It is expected that it would be extended over 8 to 10 months. The risk analysis would be completed, and the 10 months would be the final draft of the national strategy to be adopted with the Council of Ministers, and then we can start working on it. Also with the partnerships, we also are working at a sectoral level, but this is an important element of linking between goal 16, 10, and 17 together, which is quality education, strong institutions in order to implement those partnerships. And therefore, in 2019, 2020, we adopted a master's degree in the Najah University in Palestine for disaster risk reduction. Dr. Jalal Ad-Dabiq, who is at the same time with our colleagues in the association, he's a professor, and he is the head of the Disaster Risk Management Center at Najah University. He helped us design a program for disaster risk reduction for the national team as a program, because we were able also to establish the National Forum for Disaster Risk Reduction under the supervision of the Prime Minister, and we have benefited from the neighboring Arab countries. And by a decision from the Council of Ministers, we had a national technical team that was formed to be able to work in an accelerated manner to be able to manage any disaster risk when we talk about the north or the south or at the level of any city. So there was a national technical team in order to facilitate our work with them. This technical team is going to be able to receive the master's degree in disaster risk reduction, because we are convinced that it is not enough to have expertise in partnerships. We have to have also the academic level. We have to have the in-depth information about disaster risk reduction and management. These are the efforts, and this is what I wanted to tell you. I will not be long. This is how we were able to link between the 2030 plan of action and the 2017-2022 policy strategy in Palestine with the working with the Center of Disaster Risk Management in Palestine. We were able to work with the Prime Minister, and it is the same example as the Lebanese one. And this is it. Thank you for your attention.
I think we number of colleagues, those who participated in the Tunis conference, they are also aware of Palestine progress in terms of its DRM law and so on. I think one I must acknowledge one point here is that their ability to work with universities, especially Al-Najah University, and academic institutions play a very important role. We have colleagues who are from the Science Technology Advisory Group who will tell us about how they are working with countries. But I think this is one example from country in terms of value or add of academic and scientific institutions, that how they support countries. Now, so thank you for that, Dr. Uday. Now moving on to our next colleague, who is again was a very dear colleague of ours who we worked very closely all the time during the Tunis conference. For almost a year, I think we worked with them to successfully host the Africa Arab platform. So it was, I think, a great experience with them. And of course, we are also aware of their national strategies and then the way they engage partners and stakeholders in developing the strategy and also implementation of the strategy. Now, Hazar, my question to you is you have organized the whole conference. You saw the leadership in the region in terms of convening a big Africa-Arab platform. In the Africa-Arab platform, we also saw the emergence of this partnership very prominently. The stakeholder groups put their commitment statements. So I think you definitely proved your leadership in the region in terms of bringing that partnership aspect up in our agenda. So in your view, now if you look back, reflect in your own experience from your country perspective, again, the same question, what the value add you see from these partners, from these stakeholders which was created, or those who are working in the country? What is the value add in for the government?
السلام عليكم جميعا.
Peace and blessings be upon you. Thank you, Mr. Sujit. I thank Ms. Mamimi Sutori. I thank everyone in the SDR office in Cairo. First, I wanted to give an overview about the Regional Arab Conference held in Tunisia in October 2018 with the collaboration of UNSDR, the African Union, and the League of Arab States, in addition of representatives from the Arab and African regions. This forum was an opportunity for the governments and the stakeholders, along with all the involved parties, to take stock of their preparedness to manage disaster risks and as a result of the climate change. And this, of course, adds to the severity of the losses, whether we talk about losses of lives, losses in infrastructure, economic and social losses as well. This forum has been able to gather different stakeholders in order to consolidate the cooperation between them and the governments. And in fact, this was a golden opportunity to the stakeholders and to the government. The stakeholders had already a synergy and communication with the governments using a comprehensive approach of the society to guarantee the coherent policies towards inclusiveness, equality, and empowerment, which allowed to set a plan of action for 2019, for 2020. The forum also gave way to declarations, the Arab Region Declaration and the Declaration of the Arab Region and the Common Arab-African Declaration in order to for disaster risk reduction. And this was a precedent at the international level. It was a common declaration and it was a first. Of course, these declarations are not an objective per se. They are a political commitment on the part of all countries and economic groups for development and the components of the civil society and international organizations and agencies in order to establish regional and national strategies for DRR and finding plan of action for their implementation. And because there are extreme conditions, whether natural or man-made, we have to give attention and priority to these strategies at the level of the policies and programs and empower them financially and at the human level as well, nationally, regionally, and at the country level. And in this framework, the state now has to include the DRR within its development plans in a participatory and sustainable way with all stakeholders in order to achieve empowerment, inclusiveness, and equality through the consolidation of communication between them and the dedicating of finance and funding for them at the national and the local level. In addition to give an attention also for the disabled categories, including the children, the youth, the disabled, and the elderly, in the preparation, integrating them in the elaboration of plans and policies, and adopting a DRR using an approach that takes into consideration gender or a gender-based approach. A common collaboration at the international and regional levels is a very important part in order to transfer technology as well. And here I confirm the importance of knowledge in the preparation of the Sendai framework indicators and in the implementation of the early warning system. Scientific research and training in the field of prevention and DRR play a very important role, and this requires more support in the field of collaboration and cooperation at the regional and international level, especially when we talk about the multi-risk alarm system, specifically in the Arab region, because this system is very important in order to prevent disaster risks. In this field, Tunisia has been involved in all the regional and international tracks regarding DRR. Tunisia is working on implementing this strategy through an important thing adopted by Tunisia, which is adopting local participatory democracy and sustainable development for the country in the implementation of the constitution of the Second Republic that was through a review that was adopted in 2018 that empowers the local administrations in terms of plans and policies, which facilitates the implementation of plans and projects at the local level. It is also required to include DRR within their development strategies and involve all stakeholders in these projects and strategies. Second, to create a program about sustainable cities that is based on participatory planning, which requires also instruments of DRR. In Tunisia, the National Strategy for Sustainable Development for 2020 was also prepared. This strategy includes 9 axes. The most important of it is the 7th and 9th axis, which are about adapting with climate change and establishing the bases of good governance, taking into consideration, or this strategy was taken into consideration in the national strategy of DRR. And also studies, environmental strategic studies were adopted in preparing the sectoral strategies and integrated policies. And these studies take into consideration the natural and the natural disasters and any accumulated risks. And in coordination with UNSDR, the Arab Bureau of UNSDR, Tunisia has prepared the national strategy project of DRR and has prepared also a study of the indicators of that strategy after the Sendai framework. And this strategy aims first and foremost to contribute to the safety of the climate and to create an institutional and legislative framework. And this is very important for DRR in order to achieve sustainable development goals, to also promote participatory democracy and good governance, and to develop the approach of this disaster risk reduction and move towards disaster risk management. And this strategy is in its final phase, and we are currently working on more consultation with several agencies and organizations in order to continue the strategy and create intervention plans through a national platform of DRR and an early warning system for multiple risks. Thank you.
We know that you are very well progressed in your national strategy development, and you involved a lot of stakeholders in the process. I think the reason we started with the discussion with understanding what is the value add for governments, because I think that's really the key question. If civil societies, science, media, private sector, all the stakeholders we named, if the governments, those who are, again, we are saying prime responsibility for implementation of all these different agendas, if they don't see the value of these partnerships, then it's, I think, very difficult to sustain that and continue it. So I think with that spirit, we already, heard from them, and of course we have, many other countries who can share many other experiences of their engagement with stakeholder engagement with governments. Now I would like to break the session a little bit into a little bit of interaction so that we don't end up with all the presentations and we have some more interaction in between. So I would now open the floor for questions from the audience to the three speakers. I would request you also to, if you can kindly introduce yourself and pose the question to a specific speaker.
Thank you. I will speak Arabic. It's more easy for me.
I am Leila from the Tunisian Parliament. I would like to say on this very issue, unfortunately, and in international fora, there's always mention of fighting the greenhouse emissions at the expense of climate change. This is what I have seen as a priority for the international community, which is, again, the projects that reduce the increase of the greenhouse gases in nature. This is why I have to say that we, the Arab countries, have to work together first to avoid those disasters. We should prevent them. We should be able to know how they are going to happen, or at least anticipate them. And this requires full knowledge, full scientific knowledge on our part. This requires also partnerships, specifically partnerships with scientific research. And this is a weakness in the Arab world, Arab countries, i.e. the partnership between the requirements of the government to achieve the strategies of the government. But when it comes to implementation, there's always a problem. And the problem is how to implement these strategies. We have the skills, we have the human capital, we have the human capacities. The researchers are there, but how can we link between the needs of the countries in these fields which require technical knowledge and between the scientific research efforts? This is the kind of partnership that we need. This is the kind of partnership that we need to develop in the Arab world. And here we call upon the League of Arab States, because there are several countries who are alike. For example, Tunisia, Jordan, a little bit Morocco, a little bit, because we have drought, we have desertification, and there are problems related to climate change. And these are the common denominators of these countries. The Gulf countries are different. The oil countries are different. So we should have this cooperation, and there should be a system of coordination among or partnership among these countries, and that would be less costly, because these studies are costly. And when it comes to cost, we should be talking about a partnership or north-south cooperation. And the north countries, if we have the information and if we have the predictions, then it would be easier for us to negotiate or to cooperate with the West or Western countries when it comes to funding mechanisms, when it comes to funding the adaptation projects. So this is what I wanted to say. These are types of partnerships, partnerships within institutions, within countries, partnerships with some Arab countries who have the same problem, and partnership with the West or Western countries when it comes to knowledge, technical support, and funding. And sorry for being long.
Any other question to a specific speaker?
Thank you very much. I'm from the state of Qatar. It's good to see you again, and good to see Her Excellency the SRSG after a good meeting in Tunisia. And congratulations for the coordination of this important session. I think even the title says partnership, and I think without partnership, it will be difficult to achieve Sendai agreement, because partnership through the regional dimension also is very essential. And we need it, especially in the Arab world. Because in the Arab world lately, you name it, about disasters, armed conflicts, floods, climate change, all the kind of disasters you can imagine we have now. And also the journal of the UN, you can see clearly that the UN is busy with our issues. But to share with you some ideas, that Qatar is very serious about this agenda. We attach great importance to us for many reasons, and basically because prevention is one of our steadfast policies, and without it we will not be able to protect the achievements of development as well. That's why we participated in the launching of Sendai Framework 2015 in Japan, and we participated in the regional meetings, including in Mongolia in 2018, in India 2017. Doha also hosted the Arab regional meeting on UNISDR in April 2017. It's important not to forget also the outcome of the international forum in Mexico. I would like to hear from you what was implemented after that conference, and how we are getting ready to the other international forum next month that will be in Geneva. We are also going to be there at the ministerial level. We, of course, from our side, we are going to share with you also our experience when we participate in Geneva, and also when we welcome Her Excellency the SRSG in Doha, when we convene the regional workshop in Qatar of UNISDR. We are happy that you received the invitation. We very much look forward to your participation. And I would like to hear from you now about the preparation for Geneva 2019 now, which is next month at the corner, and what will be the difference and focus between Geneva next month and Mexico 2 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll just take one more question, and then we will go into to the speaker. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, my question goes to the panelists, but also to Her Excellency Mami Mitsuturi. Countries are struggling to find the pathways between the three global agendas, Sendai Framework, Paris Agreement, and SDGs, and each of the agendas is insisting on the need for partnerships. So any kind of experience from the global perspective on what kind of partnership that creates those pathways to avoid kind of parallel partnerships, and think of innovative, integrated partnerships that serve the three agendas and help the countries to do it on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since I think most of the questions are geared for Mami, so may I request you to respond?
Thank you very much for your questions. So, in response to the first question, I imagine all of you here might know, but just if you don't, so every 2 years we have the global platform, and then in between we have the regional platforms in the 5 regions. So 2017, May, we had the global platform in Cancun, Mexico. That was the first one since the Sendai framework was adopted. And now in less than 2 months, as you rightly say, we will have the Geneva global platform. I would say that the Cancun Global Platform was pretty much because of this proximity to the Sendai World Conference for Disaster Risk Reduction. It was basically to try to make the foundation and share the understanding among all the member states and also the partners on what is actually the Sendai Framework. Because if you may recall, before the Sendai Framework, we had what was called the Hyogo Action Framework, which was also valid for 10 years. And so what has changed between this? So what are our goals? And the biggest goal, as I said, the change was, let's not focus only, because response is also important, but let's not focus only on disaster management, but focus more on the disaster risk management, so prevention. And I think Cancun was the place where this shared understanding was done. Also, it was a time of building the foundation of how Sendai Framework achievement was going to be measured. So this is a bit technical, but it's important. There are 7 targets in the Sendai Framework, but how can we, in 2030, tell ourselves whether we have been successful in achieving or not the 7 targets of reducing mortality, affected people, economic loss, damage to critical infrastructure, and at the same time, increase international cooperation, increase national strategies, and increase accessibility to early warning system and disaster loss information. So the member states, again, after Sendai, they came together, they agreed on 38 indicators, which may sound a lot, but it's quite a lot, and this is a big challenge, but and we agreed on those indicators. We agreed on how these information should be gathered, and we agreed that there would become a system would be decided at our organization so that the member states can start feeding the data to us, and then hopefully by 2030 we say, okay, we've achieved all 7 targets. So I think Cancun was a moment of sharing this understanding and building the blocks towards the measurement. In Geneva, the theme is resilience dividend towards a sustainable and inclusive society. So there are 3 keywords: resilience, sustainability, and inclusivity. And when I start with the last one, this is tied to the high-level political forum agenda for this year in July, which is inclusivity. And if I go to the resilience one, it's about building resilience in the countries and societies in 2 ways. One is we'd like to see how much we can agree on and exchange views on, and what is a resilient society. It's about the physical things, truly, like infrastructure. So how can we build resilient, risk-informed infrastructure through public-private partnership? This part of the discussion will be quite important. And then in the case of societal resilience, we need to also make sure that the societies are not only the physical, but in the content resilient. So this means, this is very close to partnership. We have to make sure that all the partners are working together and mindful of all the gaps that are still existing in our different countries, but with a lot of common agenda there in order to build resilience into it. And this will lead to prevention. So we're going to focus on that. And then sustainability, which is the 3rd key word I mentioned for this coming GP. It's about how can we see that all these things that we do for disaster risk reduction will lead to sustainable development. Because at the end of the day, I think that when we talk about the Agenda 2030, the ultimate goal we need to reach is how can we reach sustainable development and achieve all the 17 goals. So these are the things that we'd like to see discussed, debated, experience shared. And because since Sendai, we've been able to create all these stakeholder groups, both at the regional level and at the global level, there will be quite a lot of meetings around stakeholders, meetings of different stakeholders within themselves, but also meetings that will bring different stakeholders together. So I think that's another big difference compared to Cancun. So that's what we're trying to achieve, but in my 1 year at the UN ISDR, I now understand that we are not about ourselves, we are about all of you around this table. So we need all your support and cooperation to make what I just mentioned happen. On the second question, so yeah, so many agendas, right? We talk about coherence a lot. It's very difficult, I understand. How do you really achieve all this together? And how can partnership make this happen? I think one key element, and it's not exclusive, I think one key element is how can we really achieve this at the local level? There was a mention about cities, making them resilient, but we really feel that this is important. And we see that because in the cities, they are the ones which bear the brunt of disasters, they are more, well, I shouldn't say more, but they are very keen about making their cities resilient. But at the same time, in terms of climate change too, because they are close to the households, and they are close to the actual industries, the manufacturing, the services that are provided. In terms of climate change adaptation too, they are very keen to see that a change is made. And of course, in terms of development, the local governments with the communities need to make sure that the community strives. So I would, as an example, I would mention that we see that the trying to make the partnership of between the local governments, the private sectors that work there, that have their employees and have their manufacturing there, the community workers who are active there. I think that partnership, strengthening that might be one key to making all these agenda move forward together. It's not the only one, but I see that that's important. Now, at the national level, what we are trying to do now, more with the other UN agencies, is to see how can we create more synergy between national adaptation plans and disaster risk reduction strategies, because there's a lot that overlap. What we see in many governments, not all, is that sometimes national disaster strategies are moved forward by ministries of interior or civil protection, the adaptation, mitigation by ministries of environment. And because I worked for the Japanese government, I know that there's an inherent DNA in governments to work in silos. And even in the governments too, we talk about breaking down the silos. A lot of people don't even talk about it either because they think our DNA still exists. But I think that's where actually the non-governmental actors can really tell the governments, look, you cannot work in silos. You have to bring in the agenda together, because for the different stakeholders, for the private sector, it's the same, disaster, climate change impact, and also for ultimately the citizens. You get impacted by the disaster and the climate change and the development issues at the same time. It doesn't matter which ministry is working on it. So I think ultimately the bottom up, the citizens asking, and the groups that represent the citizens demanding, I would use the word demanding the governments to break the silos in moving forward this agenda together might seem a long way, but I think ultimately that's what's going to happen. And if we look at what the youth are doing right now in terms of protesting against climate change, it's making an impact. Well, let's hope that we adults are clever enough to listen to the youth, but the youth know what they're talking about.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for your thoughts. I think if you have any other question to panelists, maybe hold your thought because we have a number of colleagues to speak. So I would suggest that we will again open up the floor, so it's not the end of it. So please hold your thoughts. We will go back to these questions again. We have now with us colleagues, those who are representing stakeholder groups. Now, a little background of it is that when we started to engage in the Africa Arab platform and in all the consultations, there was obviously always this stakeholder engagement partnership came up, but we had very little kind of organized way of going to some institution who can actually be the network of these stakeholders. So of course, civil society, there were a number of them already actually in a very very systematic manner they were engaged. Those groups who were engaged, they came forward and wanted to actually provide some commitment of action, and calling it an action statement rather than a statement of recommendation or something, but they came forward to say that we also, in the shared responsibility spirit, we want to also provide our commitment of action to that will complement the government. So with that spirit, we have number of stakeholder groups established. It's definitely not a exclusive club, as there is a need for including more members, more stakeholder groups, and we will certainly aspire for that. But what we have now currently established as a stakeholder group is the civil society stakeholder group, very strong again with the leadership of Dr. Imad Adli, who has been really kind of championing this networking with all the civil society organizations. They also included in their network the issues of disability and aged population, which is really a big issue and a need to be dealt with, and they have taken that responsibility with them. We have also colleagues who formed, a number of organizations formed a stakeholder group on gender parity and women empowerment, currently led by UN Women with a number of other organizations, I think Arab Water Council, Arab Organization of Arab Women Organization, and a number of other organizations. We have Science and Technology and Academia group, which is the Arab Science and Technology Advisory Group, led by Dr. Shadi Abdullah, who is the chair of the Arab Science and Technology Advisory Group, so we have the opportunity of having them and to hear from them that how they see, how they are bringing that value addition, which we ask the same to our colleagues from government, that if they see a value addition, and if it is yes, that how these groups are actually bringing that value addition. So to move on to that discussion, I would first turn to Dr. Imad Adli, who has been really championing this in the coordination among the civil society organizations in the region. So, Dr. Adli, how do you engage with the government? I mean, we have been talking about all this coherence among agendas at national level and supporting or complementing government's efforts in implementing all these different agendas. So, in your view, how you and your network been engaging with governments?
Thank you very much, Sujit, and thank you very much, Madam Izotori, for being with us here. It's a real pleasure to find you with us in one session while you are preparing for a meeting in 33 days exactly. Your question is also linked to what Ms. Mizotori just said about the DNA, the governments working in silos, because our first experience about the DRR actually started before we knew about Hugo Framework of Action, the HFA. Because at that time, we were trying to build a project of basically a partnership project that brings the different stakeholders. And of course, the government is always the most important player because they have many of the keys for many of the things that we are doing. And the idea was how we can link between climate and disaster in some of the hotspots areas in the Arab region. And I have also here to say that, unfortunately, and I'm not talking about your office, Sujit, to be very clear, I'm talking about the issue in general, that this region still does not get enough attention globally when it comes to DRR. This is something that we have to acknowledge, and even within the civil society, I'm the one who introduced this region into the GNDR, the global network, based in UK, and I am the board member representing the civil society, but this is one of the two regions that does not have a coordination mechanism for the civil society because still we are looking at Asia and, you know, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, more than we think about this region, which is, again, in addition to the DNA issue that the governments are working in silos, they are also not aware that this issue is an important issue for the sustainability plans that they are doing. And this was actually what we tried to do in 2006, and we're still trying to do this, that we try to have the development, whatever they like to call it, sustainable, they call it socio-economic development, they call it what they call it. But if they really want to have this type of economic development, they will never have this as a business model unless they have all the preventive measures to be sure that their projects will sustain and their people will be resilient. Because otherwise, they are going to invest, and the investment will be always coming in negative because they are not putting in calculation. And this is the language that we are always trying as a civil society to go and tell the governments, that what we are presenting is not something that is far from the priority that you have in mind, that it is not far from the poverty programs that you have, or education, or health. They are all linked together. So even when we are now promoting for the Sendai, we were very happy that 2015 itself, many people, they don't think this way, that in 2015, the three came together. Sendai in March, and then in September, it was the SDGs, and then it was at the end of the year, we had the climate, the Paris Agreement. So this package is not something that came, of course, governments are attending all this, but unfortunately, this kind of partnership that is developed at the global level when we meet each other and we hug each other and we talk in a very positive way, this type of partnership, once we take back the planes back to our countries, it is again back to the same DNA in silos, which is already also in the UN, by the way. It's not only the government, it's also the UN. They are competing because everyone wants to take part of the share and they want it to be, you know, and this model is actually the challenge now. But unfortunately, this kind of, when we are talking about the communities, the vulnerable communities, they don't really understand what we are talking about. And at the end, they are facing these problems and they don't find the solutions coming, so they come frustrated and they don't believe in anyone comes to tell them, okay, we want to collect some information and we know how you are, what are the you know, the problems facing your challenges and so on. They say, oh, we heard these questions so many times, but nothing happened. And this is one of the projects that also brought us to, you know, to bring the governments and tell them that the NGOs and the civil society could become really the reactor, the catalyst for what you cannot do, not in a negative way, but in a positive way. And this is why I'm always thinking about the resilient partnership, not the resilience community, but how we can make this partnership resilient. How we can make this partnership working, because most of the time, unfortunately, the initiatives come from the civil society. We go and they knock the door of the government and tell them we have a project. We had a project, very successful project, in which the government itself, they said, this is the type of project that we want to have. When we took two areas, hotspots, one in Egypt and one in Sudan, both where we took the drought issue as a target, and we went to these communities and we brought government, and we brought civil society, we brought universities, because we have to bring the science into, and the academics into the process, and the community and local authorities. And we start talking about the challenges that facing these regions, that if the drought comes, you know, they are going to be displaced. And the whole, this title was the climate-induced displacement. But in reality, when we went to think about this project, we found that the government are sitting with the communities and discussing many things. Not only, you know, how much water we are going to have, but if you want to think about resilience, you are talking about other elements. You are talking about education. You are talking about transport. You are talking about communication, telecommunication. You are talking about health services. Because people, to become resilient, it's not only that I give them an umbrella, you know, to protect them from the rain coming, or, you know, to get them a boot for the flooding. No, it is many other things that has to have in mind. And you bring this all, and then you discover the silos within the government itself. That the Ministry of Local Administration is not talking to the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health is not talking to the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Ministry of Agriculture is not talking to the Ministry of Environment, and so on. So they found that this was a good example, that they started at this level, the second level, or the level when, you know, you have all the implementers doing. They get their instructions from their ministers, and they don't care about the other thing. But when they came together and they were sitting together, here when the policy started to become more, has more impact on the communities. And this is where everyone realized that you don't need a lot of money to deal with this issue, because you already have resources inside each of these governmental bodies, and with all the resources that they have, they can together make a difference. And then the difference at the gap after that, some of it could be done by the community itself, because the community start to be, you know, convinced, and they start to feel this trust with the government. So this is the type of glue that the civil society can do. But I'm telling you that this will never be sustainable and resilient unless the UN comes as, you know, the umbrella for these kind of partnerships. When we started to do this through the League of Arab States, when our network became a member in the League of, at least we were able to get into the League of Arab States in 1995, this was the beginning to establish many partnerships at the national level, because the League of Arab States was able to provide this kind of atmosphere and like enabling environment. This is the same what I would like to see at the ISDR level, that try to bring these cases from, you know, because if it becomes every time, and I'm happy that the question came from our colleague here from Qatar, when he asked what would be the difference between Mexico and Geneva. I think the whole idea is how always this global platform and the regional platforms, they become the environment in which, the room in which this kind of partnership could, you know, get much more stronger, and you try with very minimal of support, because unfortunately we are in a very rich region, but we are in the poorest region, unfortunately. So when it comes to activities, people, they put all their money in charity. How many billions every year is invested in charity in our region, but how much of this money is put into DRR or in sustainable development? Very, very little. So I think you can come and have this magnet funds and you know, seed funds that could develop this kind of partnership and help in bringing the civil society, governments, and stakeholders together, and then the policies on paper become something tangible on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Adli. I think still the key question remains, as I heard from Dr. Adli, that how do we still make this partnership resilient? So that's also a question for everyone. Now, in terms of, I think, time, we have like 7 to 8 minutes, but if I may ask for your permission to go over the time for another 10 minutes or 15 minutes, is that okay? Thank you very much. So I will now move on to our next speaker, who is Heba Al-Hariri. She is also a colleague who has been working in different capacities, wear different hats. Yeah. So she has been working with us with different capacities and different, wearing different hats. Now she is wearing the hat of being the representative of the stakeholder group, which is the Arab Gender Equality and Women Empowerment Group for Disaster Risk Reduction. So Heba, can you tell us that how you engage, with governments? It's not an easy subject, to deal with. So in how do you, through your stakeholder network, how do you deal with the subject? And just before you start, please a comment that please feel free to talk in Arabic. The priority language is Arabic here. We have very good interpretation available by ESCWA, so please feel free to speak in Arabic.
Yes, thank you very much, Sujit. Actually, I will be speaking in Arabic.
At the outset, I would like to extend my thanks and gratitude to ESCWA, to UNISDR, for giving us this opportunity and for the great invitation addressed to us to be sharing our experience as an Arab group for gender equality and women empowerment for disaster risk reduction. Before delving into the details of the different activities undertaken by this group, I would just like to talk about what we think of, namely the importance of fostering gender equality and women empowerment in the field of disaster risk reduction. In fact, we can clearly see that there were several field studies that have been conducted in this field and that have focused on the different gender-based differences between men and women in the field of disaster risk reduction. And several differences have been identified in terms of the gendered impact of climate change and also the difference of adaptation between men and women to the different climate change impacts. And those gendered differences are resulting from several societal factors, features as well, and some gendered patterns that could be further at first based on equality, but that could be transformed into discrimination on the basis of disability, age, race, origin, and so on and so forth. And this is how the devastating impacts of such gender differences could be unfolding in several areas. I could be talking about some areas here. For instance, we have an increased mortality rate as a result of climate change, and we can see that women are disproportionately affected in terms of mortality rates, as well as the persons with disabilities. Women having disabilities also do not receive adequate support in climate change incidents. And also when there are disasters that occur, there is also very difficult mobility for the victims, and they cannot have access to relief assistance, financial and non-financial assistance. And also when it comes to elderly people and to persons with disabilities, again, they do not have access to assistive equipment. And we should also talk about domestic violence and the weak representation of women in the decision-making processes. And as a result of all these factors, this advisory group has been established in order to foster gender equality in the disaster risk reduction field, and in order to change the mindset when it comes to men or gendered impact of climate change. Therefore, we have tried to foster the active participation of women in decision-making, in administrative decision-making, and in adaptation as well. And this is how we could enable women to fully be active in sustainable development, particularly when it comes to devising environmental policies and socioeconomic planning.
In order to achieve these objectives, our group has established a timetable for 2 years where it suggested a set of activities. I'm going to mention the most important of them. First, in order to collect the aggregated data and the necessary instruments in order to implement and design policies. Today and yesterday, it was mentioned in several sessions to which I have listened. There was talk about the importance of data collection, specifically the aggregated data or disaggregated data that include information about the gender and the age category and the type of disability, in addition to analysis pertaining to the gender equality. This is why we are going to concentrate on the importance of identifying gaps in data and research in order to collect the data needed. There's also another part, which is the information and data related to migration in order to reinforce the protection of rights of women and girls in all the phases of migration through trying to create task forces at the national level or being involved in task forces and trying to integrate traditional knowledge with the modern technologies in order to support the collection of the data and diversifying them. We are also going to provide the government with strategic material, updated material that might include publications, research studies that enhance gender equality concept, the empowerment of women, and involving them in legislations and budgets and programs in order to reduce disaster risks. We are going also to concentrate on mapping the disasters, but these maps should also include gender disparities, and they should include a set of indicators that take into consideration these differences and the possibility of exchanging these maps with the Arab governments and the African governments and updating them periodically. We are also going to concentrate on supporting and reinforcing coordination mechanisms between the partners and the stakeholders in order to create or to issue periodic reports in this field at the regional or at the national or at the local levels. This is related to research and data. There's another part pertaining to reinforcing the involvement of women and girls in decision making. This is where we are going to create databases for the civil society organizations involved in this issue. And we can maybe involve or share this database with the governments to benefit from them. We are going to create a dialogue and information platforms through electronic websites to also share resources and information about this very issue. We are also going to participate in the organization of several specialized workshops at the regional and local levels with the governments to raise more awareness and to build capacities for gender equality. And last but not least, in the coming 2 years, we are going to organize a high-level conference with the governments in order to discuss climate change and DRR and defining the SDGs while concentrating on the importance of gender equality, mainstreaming, and the role of women in the design and implementation of policies. This plan is being implemented. There are specialized indicators in order to measure the progress of this plan of action. And I can say currently that our group includes very important groups from the civil society and organizations working in this field. I can mention some of them. There's UN Women Regional Office, but also we are working with some the Arab Organization of Persons with Disabilities, the Association of Environment and Sustainable Development, International Organization for Migration, and other interested parties. And in the end, I call upon any of the participants here today, if you are interested in participating with us and unifying efforts with us, because I have said in the beginning, I think that partnership is the first step towards realizing these objectives. Thank you.
So it's really indeed encouraging to see that there are a lot of actions are happening on the group, and I understand that there will be a conference. So if we can also coordinate on that conference, because we will also hear from the chair of Arab Stack that they have planned for a science conference in the same time probably. So we'll have to probably need to coordinate, and we can do that. In fact, let me just give you one information that we will be all meeting in Geneva. We have already sent the invitation. You have received it, and I think I have also received a number of confirmations. So we will be meeting on the 13th and 14th of May in Geneva. Both days we'll have, I think, 4-hour session each day on the partnership. So now moving on to our colleague from the Arab Science and Technology Advisory Group, Shadi. Let me, ask you a little bit different question. I know that you have been working on bringing the partners, the science and academia in the region together, and we have engaged with you on a number of things. But here I would like to, in this forum, I would like to ask you that we understand also there are other science and technology advisory groups working on other issues other than disaster risk reduction, such as core developmental issues. The Arab Science and Technology Advisory Group in the Arab state, which is working for SDGs. And I think it's also relevant for all other stakeholder groups that there are other networks and groups are working. So how do you reach out actually to these other groups, other science and technology groups, those who are involving academia and science community for other development areas? So how do you reach out with those events?
Thank you, Sujit. I would also like to thank the ESCWA for their invitation and for organizing this important event. I also beg your pardon because I will be speaking in English. So I was happy that Dr. Adil spoke before me in English. So I will not be the black sheep in this.
We have to change.
Yeah, okay. So thank you, Dr. Adil. Also, I would like to give a big thank for our keynote speaker, Ms. Mami Mizuturi, for being here among us and for dedicating her time and effort in the last 2 days, because she was with us and she had a close look on all our activities and achievements so far in Lebanon for the implementation of the Sendai framework. Actually, if you allow me that, I would like to put the two caps, the Arab Stack cap and the cap as a researcher at one of the governmental Lebanese institute, which is the National Council for Scientific Research in Lebanon. And actually, if we are talking that understanding disaster risk is necessarily to achieve the sustainable development goals, as many of the SDGs focuses on issues that represent underlying driver risk. For example, achieving the no poverty, reduced inequalities, climate actions, peace, justice, and strong institutions would also help reproduce or reduce the disaster risk. Nevertheless, I can say that bad development can derive risk, for examples, through unregulated, chaotic urban development or construction of vulnerable critical infrastructure. Moreover, the Sendai framework clearly recognized that a strong role of the scientific community can play in improvement and understanding of risk and communication on a new knowledge and innovation. This role has been stated in different paragraphs and sub-paragraphs in the Sendai framework, and simultaneously, out of the 38 priorities, we can find 11 of which can cope with the SDGs. It's worth mentioning that there are clear signs of challenge in the Arab region, in our Arab region, where significant progress has to be taken in order to bridge the science policy interface and to blend and integrate the DRR with the economic, social, and environmental dimension of sustainable development. Accordingly, and now if you allow me to just transform this, our activities and the spectrum of activities that we are undertaking and the humble experience of the CNRS with different institute, governmental and public institutes in Lebanon to strengthen the partnership and to support the coherence of national policies and strategies for DRR and SDGs and the sustainable development, of course. One of which, if we are talking about, is the quality of education. And I also like to underline, because here we have the integration between the different partners, the different stakeholders, and the different, like, let's say, the stags or the people that are working in different aspects in the climatic change and the SDGs and in the DRR. So, for example, in Lebanon, we have at the CNRS, because we are the scientific council, we have been since 2002 releasing some of the scholarships for the baccalaureate, the first 15 ranked, and so far we have supporting 272 of which, and this goes directly under the quality of education. We have been awarding or giving awards for the scientific excellence, scientific achievements since 2014. 45 of which researchers in different domains of sustainable development and in working in disasters and working in other social parts, they were given these excellency of research, out of which 1/3 of the 45, they are women. Others, we have a doctoral program with the EU. Each year we are releasing $2 million per year for this thing. And I can say that I have 5 PhD students working on the DRR and working on land degradation and land suitability in this issue. Also, under the clean water and sanitation, the partnership is revealed by, we have established and leading a consortium from 19 stakeholders from different representative institutes, okay, and for implementing the SDG 6. For industry, innovation, and infrastructure, we have released the Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy, STIP, which formulate comprehensive vision linking together identified societal needs and qualified human resources. If we talk about sustainable cities and communication, maybe you have, Ms. Mami, we have been introduced to our activities also and engagement with the government in this concern. We have many ongoing projects. We are responsible of measuring the seismic activity, the CBRN in the country. Also, we are working on, we have conducted many projects related to critical infrastructure, related to risk and hazard assessment on the level of the governorates and on the agricultural sector that the government is using now in order to put its strategy plan. So, also in the life and water, we have many examples. We have a boat, a scientific boat that it is measuring and monitoring the coastal areas every month with different, indicators, and different, what do you call it, physical, biological, and chemical parameters. Life on land, we ensure the conservation and restoration and sustainable use of terrestrial and inland freshwater. We are supporting this by research projects. We have only since, in 2017, 2018, we have supported 245 research projects for the Lebanese researchers with a cost of $6 million. So this was the last year. Accordingly, if we are speaking in this issue, the role that we look forward to play as an Arab stag, because we have the CNRS umbrella and for the Arab stag, also the UNISDR umbrella. So we are trying to take this experience and to put it in the Arab stag. So to provide scientific information, technical advice to the Arab region and coordinate strategic engagement of science, research, technology with decision makers to increase Arab region resilience and strengthen the regional and national disaster reductions programs that serve sustainable development. This role has been developed and set in the voluntary action statement that defined the implementation levels, targets, indicators, means of coordination with, which comes in perfect coordination with the Arab STAG role. Some of these actions, I will go just quickly, one of which is locating on status of science, knowledge, and technical availability on disaster risk resilience in the region, what is known, what is needed, and what are the uncertainties in this. In the region is an important prerequisite to identify research and technology gaps and set recommendation for research priority in the Arab region and human resources development needs. Encourage the government to increase investment of public and private sectors on science and technology in the DRR, advocate and promote DRR in the Arab region, and defend the role of science and technology for DRR that serves sustainable development. Also bringing science and technology in sectorial plan, which is setting the DRR actions on a sectoral level that has been shown to be very effective for building resilience and like engagement of science institution in DRR at local level, in ministries, local government, adoption of sectoral-based projects and strategies, increasing the number of studies that are tackling risk by sector. Also promoting multidisciplinary DRR research and innovation inclusion, higher education, as well as professional training through regional-related organization. Of course, this can be developed through curriculums, starting point to enlarge the scientific network on DRR. This will ensure human resources development in this field and can encourage grants for academic research related to DRR and sustainable development. Also develop a network of science and technology institutions in the Arab region to have extended network to promote, prioritize, and advance multidisciplinary research and technology aspect of disaster risk in integrated environment. Enhance teams' efforts in hazards and disaster monitoring and research building. And this is why this year, hopefully, we are hosting the Science Policy Interface Conference, the first Arab Science Policy Interface Conference for DRR and for sustainable development. It will be held, hopefully, in Beirut with the coordination of the UNISDR and the Arab, of course, the Arab STAG and the Lebanese CNRS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shadi. Again, encouraging actions. So in interest of time, I'm already told that 6:30 is the max the interpreter can stay. I really would like to thank them that they have agreed to stay a little bit more time from 6 to 6:30. So we have to really conclude maybe within 15 minutes. So moving on, I would like to now open the floor for both the setup panelists, but at the same time, I would request for quick interventions from our colleagues from IFRC and from the youth stakeholder group, those who have also contributed a lot during the Tunis conference. And the same question to both of you, if you can quickly intervene on your actions you have been carrying out in terms of complementing the effort of governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sujit, Ms. Mami, and esteemed present audience. As the representative of the United Nations Major Group for Arab Children and Youth, Sendai Stakeholder Working Group, I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion that will guide everyone towards a more inclusive and resilient society. While the absolute number of disasters around the world has almost doubled since the 80s, the average number of natural disasters in the Middle East and Northern Africa has almost tripled over the same period of time. These small and large-scale disasters substantially affect youth. We are in a vulnerable position, and disasters have long-term impact on our lives. From armed conflict to natural disasters and climate change, Arab children and youth are facing extreme conditions that are disrupting their very basic needs, interrupting our education, and reducing the chances of a safe and a decent job. It also compromises our preparedness for better engagement and participation in different fields, including disaster risk reduction. This creates negative consequences for us today, but it also has indirect long-term social, economic, and cultural impact on the wider society. However, we still hold tight to our role as the agents of change as per the Sendai framework and as per our stance and firm commitment as a youth group as well. We're very pleased with the place we carved for our participation in monitoring, follow-up, and review of the Sendai framework. However, we're still looking for more. Children and youth possess knowledge, innovation, and modernity. Including the youth in DRR on different levels means promoting out-of-the-box perspectives that can change the future of DRR in the region. We, from the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth, Arab DRR Working Group, have been working on peer-to-peer trainings in DRR and empowerment of youth in the region. There are tough challenges due to the unique participatory culture in the region, as well as for the lack of awareness to DRR as a concept. Accordingly, we're working on building strong partnerships with youth groups that are working on relevant sustainable development goals in order to promote active communication and synergies between the implementation of global agendas. We will definitely need the support and partnership of the different stakeholder groups present and the local governments as well to mainstream DRR among youth through education on all levels. In order for us to move forward, we need to be given a sense of ownership and accountability when it comes to DRR. As much as we're pleased to be part of sessions and meetings like the one we're having right now, we would like to be more involved in the implementation process of the Arab DRR strategy on regional, national, and local levels. We're currently mapping and reaching out to different entities with potential youth engagement opportunities. However, it's important to note that this should be a two-sided process. Youth engagement is no longer a plus, it's a necessity, and therefore member states and agencies are urged to prioritize youth engagement in their upcoming action plans. Also, we would like to congratulate the Arab STAG for their impressive progress that they're making on such a short period of time. We would also like to request their guidance and mentorship in providing more youth-friendly content and access to data that we can use to promote for DRR among youth and children. Summarizing, I want to stress that meaningful youth engagement means inclusion of young people in all stages of developing, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating the Sendai framework, and also in the policy-making levels. We would like that in the future, instead of including us only as a way of a representation in meetings and to go beyond the tokenism and include engagement of youth from marginalized population, reaching the phase to plan with the youth instead of planning for the youth.
Thank you, Marwa. Excuse me, Thank you, Marwa. And we have one more colleague, IFRC, if I may request you to be as brief as possible. Thank you.
I mean, we are resilient, we can adapt. I will go very quickly to brief what we are doing here in the region. In the region, we have, or I can speak in Arabic. So, في عنا
we have around 2 million volunteers in the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. In 2017, there have been around 2 million activities regarding DRR. The national societies or national organizations are not international organizations. It is a single a national organization in one country that takes its mandate and its task from the available or from the already existing government, and that works before and after the disaster. And what makes the national committees capable of doing change in societies is acceptance, because they are living with the community, living with the society. And here we can give an example about what is happening with the Syrian Red Crescent, which is the only one capable of reaching the marginalized marginalized categories because of the mandate that it has. Also, the Iraqi Red Crescent has been involved in helping with the problems happening in Mosul lately, and it collaborated with the government with the contingency plan that happened in that region. The contribution that we are capable of doing is working with the government, and the fact that we are inside the local communities, because our volunteers are part of the society, and therefore throughout the participatory work with the communities, we are able to assess weaknesses and establish local plans with the communities and ensure the participation of women, of the elderly and the disabled, and the decision makers, involving them everywhere. And when we are working with the local administrations at the governorate level and at the national level, we are capable of conveying their voices so that they can have access to resources. And whenever there is a national plan at the local level, at the national level, we are able to translate it at the local level, and this is making a huge difference. And we are making first respondents in the communities. We are trying to put them on the system that exists in the country where they are as first respondents, and we are empowering the local organizations' mandates and capacities so that they can do their job in terms of raising awareness. They are capable of accessing information, and they are working with the Ministry of Education. For example, in Lebanon, we are training the observers in the Ministry of Education on DRR. We are coaching them to continue with this very field. Also, we are working with Dr. Shadi to be able to translate the scientific material for that, so that the community can read it well and deal with it well through our work in the community-based data collection, and to be able to benefit from this. I can say a lot, but I don't have enough time for this. Thank you.
I understand there are indications from our colleagues, our interpreters, that they have to leave. I mean, before they leave, I would like to thank them that they have actually, taken some extra time, and thank you very much for the great job, our colleagues interpreters. So maybe we have to run this for another 5-10 minutes without interpretation. So if there are any burning questions, I would really burning or yes, Tariq.
Thanks, Sujit. I just have a simple question. How do you plan to measure the impact and efficiency of partnerships in your work?
That's an excellent question. And I would like to actually quickly respond to that. This is really an important issue, and what we at least try to do is that we keep this engagement alive, so that we bring partners together, but not like one-off once in 2 years or something, but every 6 months we have partnership meetings where we try to engage with them to understand how they're progressing. If you look at their plans, they have also very clear structured plans of what they do, action plans. They come and actually share with everyone what they're doing. So this is a sort of a forum that measures how actually how partnership is effective.
I have the answer for the question to Dr. Tariq. Because we don't measure, actually, when we ask governments to send country reports, there should be an element, very clear element, about how they enhance partnerships during the period they are reporting about, and how they select the partners, because this is very important. If you have this as I know that 30 indicators are too much, and the sustainable development indicators 200 something. So governments would say, but if they are putting reports, there should be, like exactly when you do your PRA performance review, whatever assessment, this has to be also part of the assessment. How you manage to get the partnership with other government agencies, with non-governmental agencies, and they have to give examples. It's not only that in their speeches they say we are in honeymoon always with other stakeholders. This is not enough. We have to see offsprings. Yeah, we have to see product of this partnership.
Thank you very much. We have one more.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a proposal probably to the countries in terms of what can civil society, actually the stakeholder groups can do in support to what the governments are doing in implementing the Sendai framework. One is civil society is perceived as a partner more in the recovery and the rehabilitation rather than in the prevention, where they can play a key role to support the government's effort to prove the development. Two, linking up to the SDGs indicators, if you look into the metrics that was presented yesterday on how much is gray in terms of access to data, tier 3 is the majority of the indicators. Data is not there. And I think the civil society has a key role to play in providing data for those this category of indicators. Science and linking science to policy. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for your statement. I think the challenge in the region is that the lack of multi or interdisciplinary research that looks into disaster risk reduction beyond silos in science itself. So I think the problem is that we have silos at all levels. I think the experience of scenarios in the region is unique, and if there is a way to share this experience with other research organizations that are more on the very disciplinary thematic research, that is useful, but that is not enough to embrace the challenges of disaster risk reduction and also the implementation of the SDGs. So this is a call to CNRS probably to play this leading role in sharing the experience of CNRS in Lebanon.
Thank you very much. I'll take one last intervention, and I have to turn it to the panelists to quickly respond if you want.
Thanks, Sujit. This is Bashar Al-Ali from UNOPS. Disaster happened. It's like a test of if there is like weak coordination / partnership or strong one. And everyone will know at that time. But of course, we want to measure that before a disaster happens or occurs. And I think when we go to assess the capacities and coordination, I think we should go deep a bit into the root causes of the why there is weak partnership or coordination. If we know the causes, we can work on these gaps and we can address them. Because it's very important to know the why. Why, these silos which we see. Because, of course, when we talk about partnerships, it's either internal between even the same ministry or ministries, or external between, governments, private sector, and international organizations. So I think the root causes maybe is important to know and address, so we can maybe have better solutions or approach towards strengthening the partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to turn it to our panelists for any last interventions from your side. Nanda?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for this wealth of information that we got from this out of this session. If I may add, again, on the question of partnership and what our colleague from UNEP just mentioned, the root causes of not having not focusing more on partnership, I think it has started already with the Agenda 2030. I don't want to every time say Agenda 2030 and stuff, but the importance of Goal 17, the importance of partnership, it has changed the mindset of many people now. We see it. We see how stakeholders are coming together. We see how youth are participating in all our panels now. And I second what you just said about planning with the youth, not planning for the youth. This is also very important. And whenever we find an example of a success story that governments or civil society have really achieved, please, it has to come forward and it has to be shown as much as we can. So this is what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nada.
And only one point I want to talk about the coordination. I know that there is good efforts in coordination in different levels in Arab countries at the national level between government, civil society, private sector, academic sector. But I didn't notice at the last 2-3 years that there is the same level or the same kind of coordination between Arabs, focal points, Arabs civil society groups, or Arab African groups. I think Yunus, they are your office in Cairo as for the Arab states can help in ideas or initiatives how to encourage them to, because for example, I work in the government, I try to make a network in civil society for the group. I talked with Dr. Ahmad in Tunis, but there is only 2-3 organizations in Palestine are linked to the network here. We have 2,860 civil society organizations has programs in human rights, AIDS, so and so, awareness. How only 2 or 3 or whatever 5 who linkage to that? There is a problem, I think, in the Arab level, literal or more than that in coordination.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Just I would like to make a small announcement, not as a government, but as an NGO. Even the civil society have a key role to play in disaster risk reduction. I would like to announce that last week in Tunis, we will hold the second biorisk management symposium in Tunis from 2 to 5 April. And on the 3rd April, we create the MENA region network for biological risk management. And the secretariat will be in Tunis, and in this network we will have actually Tunis, Morocco, Egypt, Iraq, Algeria, Jordan, Libya, and Lebanon. And we hope that this network will work with all our partners at the regional and international level to support all the risks related to biological risks, biosafety and biosecurity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hazar. So if there are no...
Okay. One second. We are working together on something that I want to emphasize on it, which is an initiative that came with ISDR and NRC as well, the Words into Action manual. We have taken the responsibility as RAID in translating this into Arabic. The very final text is, we are finishing it within the coming 2 days. And I would really like to see, as we did with ISDR regional office, when the office was initiated, this was a partnership through the protocol we had. We made the program and the office visible in the region by organizing 7 forums in 7 countries. I would like also to see how far we can take this words into action, because this is something that people can try to make the exercise and look at the words. Believe me, when I had the meeting on words into action with the national DRR, Egyptian National whatever committee, they were looking at the articles of the Sendai as who agreed on this. Okay? They were discussing and asking who agreed on this, who agreed on this language, and I was telling them it is not my language, it is what you agreed on. I swear to God, this is what happened in the Cabinet of Ministers. So please, let's go, and because this will be an exercise for everyone to know how these words can go into action.
Indeed, I think it's really important. Eva.
Yeah, just like a quick comment. I didn't actually had the opportunity to maybe ask our representatives here to talk more if they have already mainstreamed the gender aspect in their plans and the strategies for the DRR. But anyway, I was really pleased to hear their engagement with the Arab Stag, and I also would like to take this opportunity to offer them also to have some maybe side discussions to see how we can mainstream and how we can work together in doing some of our activities to benefit from experience and the lessons learned from your side, and also share with the other countries or mainstream in case it wasn't really fully covered in your strategies. Thank you very much.
Always at the end, so.
This is the sweet thing.
Thank you. So I'm just responding, I will be quick, just responding to our colleague Hamul Amrani from the League of Arab States. This is why we are having, or we are hosting the Arab Stag in the CNRS, in order to transform this knowledge and this humble experience to the different parts of the Arab world. And I would seize the opportunity also that I forgot also to thank the League of the Arab States, especially Mrs. Nada Al-Aghazi, for her endorsement and for keeping us engaged with them in different committees, because you know we have one of our scientists and active member of the Arab Stag is also being part, or he's also active in the League of the Arab States, that we miss him now, Dr. Wadid Aryan. So also we would like to thank you for all your support for the for us, and we hope we can establish and enhance this partnership for the sake of the different Arab countries and for the scientists in the different Arab region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shadi. Now I'll finally hand it over to Mami for final remarks.
Yes, my final remarks are very easy. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to participants, and thank you very much to our organizing partners, ESCWA, UN Women, UNOPS, UNESCO, and our commitment to keep on strengthening partnership. So thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Mami, for spending this time with us. Thank and again, I think we will continue this in Geneva with the partnership meeting.